Episode 2, School is No Place for Horsing Around. This episode kind of begins off with the opening shot, just like in the manga, with the houses being shown in the city, but then you see Akane running off. In the next scene, which this shot was actually missing from the first episode, but put in this episode, we get further development with Ramna and Ramna's father training at the dojo of the Kendos, of the Tendo's dojo. And during that time, of course, we see the little antic where they both fall into the water and turn into their cursed afflictions, and that's where they get into their little banter, and that is before they end up having to go to school, and that's where the plot gets set in, where Akane is being told she has to take Ramna to school because that is her fiance, and that's where we get more into the manga-esque accurate plot of this story. Nabiki and Kasume announced that breakfast is ready to Ramna and Gemma, who are training outside, but of course they're still in the process of their sparring match, and that's when they both fall into the water. And during that time, Akane leaves a backhanded compliment saying, well, I guess they are pretty good. Although this is anime only, I'm okay with this because it does give us some character development between Ramna and his father, trying to show us how their relationship is while they're training, and a little bit strained because I guess he's still upset about this whole prearranged marriage thing that's going on. We finally get into the actual plot where the manga follows as well, where Gemma tells Ramna that they're going to be staying there for a while, and of course that means Ramna is going to have to go to school since they're staying there. And that's when Nabiki tells Ramna that he's going to have to go to school, the same school as them. And as Akane is walking by, Akane says, okay, I'll join you guys, and Nabiki says no. That's your fiance. You need to go ahead and walk together to school. So then eventually Akane goes up to Ramna and says, are you ready to go to school? And that's when Ramna says to Akane, he's not ready. He's not gonna, like, the romance anime trope where he's saying he's not ready, but then we get the comedic Gemna as a panda bear giving him his thing, saying, here you go, you can go to school. Next, we get the next scene of Akane and Ramna walking to school. Ramna's walking on top of the fence, and then Akane is on the sidewalk telling Ramna that if they're in school, they're going to act like they don't know each other. Akane tells Ramna that she doesn't want him hanging around her at school, and then that's when Ramna says he doesn't like hanging around tomboys like her. She gets pissed, but before she could even react and attack Ramna's attacked by his dad, surprisingly, Gemna in his human form, who punches him upside the head and says, you're in no position to be picky about women. And that's where he ends up tripping him over the fence, and he falls into the water and transforms into a panda. They get into a little small scuffle, but then Ramna ends up getting away. I still appreciate how the dialogue in the English dub here in the OG is more accurate to the manga's dialogue that I'm reading along to. Also, the animation for the fight is more accurate as you see Panda Gemna try to swipe at Ramna, and Ramna is kind of just squatting down on the fence and just kind of squirming away slowly, and then he does a backflip. When Ramna lands, he says, what a lame attack, and then water gets splashed on him by the woman that is mopping the floor nearby. This, of course, turns Ramna into his female form, so now it's female Ramna, and of course she doesn't want to go to school at this point in time because she's now a girl and doesn't want to go to school as a girl. Akane then goes inside of the doctor's office to try to look for some hot water for female Ramna to turn back into male. So this part is actually anime only as well, because they're actually inside of the doctor's office, and this is where we meet Dr. Tofu inside of the doctor's office as well, where he does the same kind of thing just like the manga, where he has the skeleton Betty and meets Ramna and introduces himself. After the confusion, Akane finally comes back with the hot water, but while Ramna is actually scared and on the door, her fingers actually get caught and slammed into the door comedically. Dr. Tofu is like the older doctor, but he's been a part of the family and always been helping out the family, and I guess Akane has always had a crush on him, and it was actually to be revealed that Dr. Tofu has a crush on Akane's older sister that's around the same age as Dr. Tofu. At this point, it's 8:26, and now Akane and Ramna are still on their way to school, running late. Finally, they've arrived at the school, but just outside of the building, a lot of boys come out of the building to attack Akane. You see a wrestler, you see a boxer, somebody on the hockey team, somebody from the fencing team, somebody with a karate uniform on. They're all coming after Akane to try to take her down for some strange reason. While all of this is happening, Ramna's just sitting here watching in confusion and shock. But then Nabiki is telling Ramna that he can go ahead and go to class. He doesn't have to worry about Akane. And that is shortly after Akane beats everybody up. And that's when Kuno shows up. All of this was because of Kuno. It's been revealed that because Kuno and a lot of other classmen have a crush on Akane, the only person that is allowed to date Akane is somebody that can defeat her in combat, but she's a trained martial artist. So because nobody can beat her, they can't ask her out to a date. A rose is thrown towards Akane, who catches it and Thunderstrike. That's when Kuno introduces himself. Kuno is an upperclassman that happens to have a crush on Akane. Kuno wanted to fight Akane to try to defeat her and ask her out, but then seeing that Ramna's here and Ramna's trying to figure out what's going on, Kuno doesn't take too kindly to this, and he says that he is being too friendly towards Akane and too formal, and questions who he is and challenges him to a fight. But due to him being respectful, I say that with air quotes, Kuno decides to introduce himself to Ramna and give his full status of being captain and superior classman, and the dialogue that he gives here is more accurate to the manga as well. Ramna reveals that he's staying under the same roof as the Tendos, and that's when Kuno goes crazy because Kuno is jealous because he has a crush on Akane. Kuno then goes on the strike. He tries to strike at Ramna after accusing Ramna of hounding Akane, but then he misses and strikes the wall. It then starts raining. He slices the tree. Ramna dodges. The tree falls down. Everybody is watching in shock as what's going on in this fight. Ramna gets up in Kuno's face to try to let him know that he does not care for Akane like that, and he could have Akane if he liked. Ramna then goes to insult Akane, and Akane goes and insult him back. That's of course when we get Ramna jumping in the air to try to attack Kuno. It then starts to rain, of course. And then that's when Ramna turns into his female form because of the rain. But luckily enough, Genma was there as his panda form to knock out Kuno, grab Ramna and leave. And of course, he has a teapot with him to try to turn Ramna back into the male form. Ramna tries to recuperate in the PE uniform, the PE equipment room. And that's where he tries to dry off. Akane meets up with Ramna and Genma, and that's where he then is turned back into his male form. But that's before he notices that he has a bruise on his neck from Kuno's sword. Akane then lets Ramna know that the fight could have went badly had Ramna actually gotten struck by Kuno's sword. We then go to the next scene where insufferable is written on Kuno's forehead in the classroom. Ramna is then introduced to his class by his teacher as a new student, but due to being late to class from the fight from earlier, Ramna and Akane have to wait outside in the hall. Kuno then finds out from Nabiki that Ramna and Akane are fiancés to one another, and that's when he goes crazy in class and is told to go stand out in the hall. Akane and Ramna, while standing outside in the hall, are still having their little conversation and standing outside. And that's when, jokingly, Akane says she's going to throw the water on him since Ramna says he won't fight girls. And shortly after, that's when Kuno appears, trying to say that he wants to challenge Ramna to a second fight, round 2, with all the students from the classroom gossiping about Akane and Ramna's engagement towards each other. That's when Kuno goes on the offensive and tries to attack Ramna. That's where Ramna runs in the hallway to try to find a different fighting location. And that's where, of course, he runs and decides to jump outside of a window, not realizing that their story is up. They end up falling into the pool below. The episode ends when you see the splash and Akane looks up and asks where Ranma is. Now we move on to the remake episode 2 on Netflix titled I Hate Men. which is the same episode as the second episode as the original, which we're gonna go ahead and compare now. Unlike the original series, it starts off right away with Gimna letting Ramna know that they're gonna be staying at the dojo for a while. The next part is still just like the original, where Nabiki walks by letting him know that they're gonna go to the same high school with her and Akane. And then she lets Akane know that Akane needs to walk him to school since that's her fiance. It's kind of funny in this version, Nabiki has more of an attitude. She tells Akane that walking with her is kind of annoying anyway, so she needs to go ahead and walk with Ramna because she doesn't want to walk with her. That's kind of funny. The main difference here in comparison to the originals that it gets to them going to school right away. We don't have that whole breakfast scene or the scene with Ramna and Gimna having a fight in the intro where we see what their relationship is like. It just cuts to them just walking to the school right away with this new unique animation where they want to act like they don't know each other, and that's when Ramna teases Akane saying he would never date a tomboy like her, and Gimna pops out randomly and tries to fight Ramna, and that's where the scene is a little bit extended from the manga and from the original. Actually, the original made it more manga accurate. This one, instead of Ramna doing like a little crab walk like he does in the original to try to avoid Gimna's attacks, he says, "Ooh, look, there's a person doing a crab walk," to distract Gimna, and then he kicks him away, and it has like a more dynamic animation because I guess they wanted to show off this unique animation. It looks good. I can definitely tell the dialogue is more Americanized and not as accurate as the manga or even the original dub. That's interesting, but it does look good though. That's when he ends up getting turned back into his female form due to the woman that's mopping and throws the water nearby, and that turns Ramna into his female form. Akane goes to look for some water to turn Ramna back into his male form before going to school, because just like in the original, he doesn't want to go to school into the female form. That's when they meet Dr. Tofu outside of his office, just like in the manga. Unlike the original where it's inside, they go outside and meet Dr. Tofu outside. So this scene is actually more manga accurate, where Dr. Tofu's met outside scares Ramna half to death with the skeleton named Betty. And strangely enough, doesn't Dr. Tofu look just like Moroku from Inuyasha? Wink wink. But yes, this interaction is more manga accurate. She holds on to the little building right there, and then that's where we get Kane with the hot water, which she hands to Ramna. The dialogue between Kane and Dr. Tofu is more in line to the manga, so no change there. And then we quickly get Ramna and Akane running to school right away. So the pacing is a little bit more akin to the manga, where it cuts away some of that extra scenes where you see shots of the school, people walk into school, shots of like the front of the school where you see it's like 8:25. We immediately just get to them running to the school, them talking about Dr. Tofu being a martial artist because he was able to sneak up on Ramna and things like that. Then because Akane showed her feelings, having a crush on Dr. Tofu, that's when he's like, "I thought you hated men." But then here comes these guys in front of the school who want to fight Akane, a martial artist. You see a boxer. You see somebody with a fencing uniform on, all wanting to take on Akane. Why? Just like in the original, of course. Because of Kuno. She says, "Out of the way, I'm gonna be late." But of course, they charge at her, and she beats everybody up with ease because she's a trained martial artist at the Tendo Dojo. During this whole beatdown, that's when Ramna's still, just like in the original and manga, she's Ramna sitting on top of the porch on the side and saying, "Hey, what's going on?" That's when Akane's sister shouts out, "Why don't you just come inside? Akane can handle these guys." Soon after, she beats everybody up. Shortly after beating everybody up, that's when we get Kuno. Just like in the original, Kuno shows up right after the defeat of all these men that wanted to challenge Akane for Akane's hand at taking her out on a date. That's when we get Kuno throwing the flower at Akane, and Akane catches it. Instead of saying Ramna's being friendly with Akane, in this one, he's saying that Ramna's being very impudent with Akane. When Kuno introduces himself, his dialogue is mostly the same. Him wanting to introduce himself first due to his introduction with Ramna. And there are some dialogue changes here and there, but it's mostly the same, saying he's the captain of the... And again, the pacing is a little bit more sped up here, where as soon as Ramna introduces himself, he gets angry, Kuno, and attacks Ramna. After Ramna says he's part of the Tendo martial arts. Anything goes, and staying under the same roof as Akane, and that's what it sets him off. It then starts to thunder, and the clouds start to get dark, just like the original during the fight. Do get more of the unique animation and dynamic shots where after Kuno gets mad again, he then goes to strike at Ramna and dodges. Ramna dodges it, and he slices in half the building that the school was, where it shows the school sign. Then dodges and lands on top of the tree trunk, dodges that. Then Ramna goes to get in his face and be really quick, close the distance to say that he doesn't like Akane. And that's when Akane gets angry, throws the backpack at him, and calls him a pervert, which is actually more in line to the manga than like the original, where it kind of cuts out. Ramna does his jump shot and then does his attack on Kuno, lands the 2 fingers to Kuno's forehead, but then it starts raining. Nice thunder shot we get, but then Ramna turns into a girl. But during that scene, his father, Gemna, in his panda form, comes in, knocks Kuno down, hilariously, just like in the original, and everybody's like, is that a panda? They then make it immediately to the PE equipment room. So this scene is much more quicker than the original, where it's kind of drawn out, and you see the outside of the PE uniform room. And Akane is already here, saying, you already have a bruise here on your neck. And that's where he's getting turned into his male form while telling the story about how he could have beaten Kuno easily. Here we're in the classroom, and idiot is actually written on Kuno's forehead, unlike the manga where buffoon is written on his forehead, and then insufferable is written on his forehead in the dub of the original. And then we get Ramna being introduced to the class, just like in the original. But because he was late, him and Akane have to go stand in the hall. The dialogue here is just like the originals, where they're blaming each other for being late, and she's like, well, I could have beaten these guys myself like I usually do. And then Ramna says, yeah, well, I don't know about that. So we get the kind of the same thing where Kuno goes crazy in class, and then because of Nabiki telling Kuno that Ramna and Akane are engaged. So he then tells Kuno to go stand in the hall, but Kuno goes into like this locker room in the room and changes into his like his regular uniform with the sword, almost like Superman, which I thought was kind of funny. And I will say Ramna is kind of a smartass in this version as opposed to the original. Here comes Kuno after he just changed. He ran into the hallway to attack Ramna with the bucket of water, which Ramna dodges, and then he tries to chase down Ramna in the hallway to try to fight right here. And that's where you see the rest of the class come out of there. They like burst open the windows outside of the classroom, asking Ramna and Akane about their marriage. There's like paparazzi people showing up, unlike the original, who Ramna then runs away so he can look for a better fighting location, in which Kuno follows. The remake actually does have the teacher here from the manga who says, hey, you guys need to stop running in the hall, which is actually missing from the original. So now Ramna jumps out of the window, which he doesn't realize is 3 stories high up, which has a pool. So they jump right into the pool. In the original, this scene was extended out, so you would have had to watch 2 episodes to get the full scene right here. But here, this is the full scene, in which Ramna is now a girl, and he's in the water in the female form trying to swim away, and Kuno is floating trying to find out where Ramna is. Kuno, not realizing that Ramna is now a woman, or the person that he once thought was Ramna is a woman, he squeezes her boobs and then Ramna punches Kuno in the face and then flips him out of the pool, slams him onto the concrete, and then she flips over the fence, just like in the manga actually. So that's manga accurate. With Kuno being confused, he believes that the male Ramna ran away, and male Ramna is a coward, so then he gets up right away after all of this. Female Ramna is in the tree trying to shake off because she, her pants are wet, and she's trying to recuperate and figure out what's going on. And with Akane right behind her with some hot water, trying to tell Ramna how stupid he is for jumping into the pool. Just like in the original, Kuno is challenged by Akane, who then goes to challenge him to give Ramna time to switch back into his female form. But Ramna is struggling to try to hold this hot teapot in the tree while she's got her legs crossed on the tree trunk, while Akane kicks Kuno over a little too far over to the tree. That lands right on top of the teapot, in which Ramna is looking at him like, what's going on? He then asks, did you see somebody with a pigtail, a male? And then female Ramna is shaking her head funnily like, nope, I didn't see that person. After this little confusion, Kuno then challenges female Ramna to a fight and deduces that if he loses, he'll just go out with female Ramna anyway. which female Ramna says nobody wants to go out with him and then knocks him out. After his defeat, after Kuno's defeat, we immediately get over to the next couple of scenes, which is more aligned to the manga, with Gemna asking why Ramna made Akane's day so crazy at school today, with the next scene being Akane and her sister talking about how Ramna's ruining her life. But then we immediately get to the next day at school where Kuno's trying to ask Nabiki about female Ramna, if she knows anything about her, in which of course she does. Kuno then decides to write an invitation letter to female Ramna, which he gives to Nabiki to give to female Ramna. This letter was to meet at Sunday morning at 10 a.m. So it flashes over to them meeting, and they actually meet like in this baseball field, unlike the manga where they meet like at a beach looking area. So here goes Kuno, who decides to meet female Ramna, but he's not meeting her to challenge her to a fight. He doesn't have his sword, which Ramna was asking for. She thought that this was gonna be a duel. She actually receives a bouquet of flowers from Kuno, with them doing a shot that looks accurate to the manga. Very nice too. The episode ends with Kuno walking away saying that he's in love with female Ranma.
She don't wanna be saved, don't save her. 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 She don't wanna be saved.